Hey, welcome to today's LINC Talks podcast. We're going to be talking about building God's house. And got three gentlemen here that are going to help us with that conversation. Pastor Jarod Smith of New Tribe Church down in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Pastor Ross Scheer from Big Rapids Resurrection Life Church. And then Jeffrey Parker, who is a part of Jeffrey Parker Associates and has helped a lot of our churches in their building projects and building programs. We want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey. I know that you got into this thing because you're an architect and you've got some skill sets there. But as you and I have talked over the years, there's something behind your skill set that really drives you to help local churches in building projects. Talk to us a little bit about that. Would you do that?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a family where we went to church all the time. My dad was a contractor, so I was aware of buildings, and I always thought churches turned out a little odd in how they got built, and so I thought, man, I can do better than that.
Yeah.
And but Christianity and making a difference is a big deal to me. So I've really found a way to combine my Christianity with being a Christian with also architecture, where I feel like I can make a difference. What we have is like a ministry.
Yeah.
So I get thrilled when I wake up every day and can jump out of bed and look forward to the different churches I'm interacting that are just hitting it out of the park, changing lives.
Yep.
But yet their buildings are getting in the way, and I have a skill set to help them out of that.
Yep.
And it just makes you feel good inside to empower churches in that way.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Ross, you've been in several building projects as your church has grown. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that, how the structure can really impede growth. And, Jeffrey mentioned that sometimes our building, our parking, those kind of things get in the way of our growth. Talk a little bit about how you've gone through those growing pains and how important it's been to have the right building.
For sure, yeah. Actually, Jeffrey helped us in our last build because the facility that we had as the church had grown over the years was kind of like piecemealed together. The church started really small, and it was a classroom trailer that, some families bought and put on a piece of property. And then as it grew, they bought another one and just bolted the doors together. And then it grew, and so then they built a pole barn over top of that. And that seems crazy, but there's so many churches that have done that, especially outside of the bigger cities. Yeah. It's like, oh, we grown, we need some more space. And so then we ended up with this crazy facility with all these long, wonky hallways. You remember how
Yeah, I sure do, yeah.
I remember when they tore it down to build what we built together, like the trailers, the frames were still there, and there were like rubber tires still on some of these things, and we couldn't believe it. But yeah, so what we did with Parker is took all of that off and then built a quality children's area and foyer that would set us up for future growth. Like, the thing that they did was think about what's the next step, not just what's this step.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jarod, you're kind of, you've had some transitions in your growth. You started, where did you guys start again?
We started in an old funeral home.
An old funeral home. That's what I was thinking.
Renovation is our middle name.
So you were in an old funeral home, and then you went into the present facilities?
We went into a
strip mall,
a storefront.
Yeah.
It used to be a YMCA and then a lighting store.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we did that a few more times.
Yeah.
And then community center, load in, load out.
Yeah.
Because we had a flood event.
Yeah.
So we've had a few environments we've had to learn to renovate and work with, but we never had a trailer up on tires. I love that. That beats all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've had to figure out how to take an existing building and kind of restructure things so that it facilitates ministry. But you guys are on the cusp of building.
Yep.
And I think Jeffrey's involved with that process.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey, talk about a little bit about, like, from your mindset as you go into a building project with a team, how do you connect their vision and mission with what your assignment is?
Well, I typically try to get to know the pastors and their ministry. Each church is wired real different from one to the next.
Yep.
And you want to capture the vibe of that church, what their objectives are, what their long-term objectives are, and their short-term objectives, and then find a way to make a purpose-driven building to bring those to life.
I like that. Purpose-driven building.
It is. It's all about being purpose-driven. And then some churches end up making it more fancy, with finishes and all that. Some more conservative.
Yeah.
But in the end,
Some casual with a coffee bar and help some of
exactly.
our churches with
And then
that.
the trick is to make all that happen and fit within what's affordable,
Yeah.
because there's so much you can do, but money always comes into play.
Yeah. So the key is matching the building with the mission,
It is.
because at the end of the day, what both of you are trying to accomplish, and I'll let you guys kind of jump in here, what both of you are trying to accomplish is an environment and a culture that can bring transformation to lives and to families. So talk to us a little bit, maybe how in your interaction in your building program, your building processes, how maybe some dynamic tensions of trying to marry those two, maybe some of the complications that you've gone through, how you overcame those, how you cast the vision, and how you empower your architect to build what you want to see happen. So.
I think the biggest challenge is how to get what you have in your head onto a piece of paper. And so when we finally got to the spot where we had, land that was ready to be built on, we were well into the architectural conversation. By the way, I think getting ahead of the conversation is better than waiting. Rather than waiting till you have property to build on and waiting till that land is ready to build on, to go ahead and engage with someone who can take your vision and your ideas and help you put it on paper. And so I felt like that was the first couple of years of getting to know Jeffrey and his team. Was they were putting before us things they had worked on, and we were going, no, that's not what we want, and coming back with, here's what we're trying to do. And I think that conversation, how many revisions have we gone through? 20?
Yeah, possibly 20.
20, 25.
Yeah. And they keep getting better.
They get better, each time, but that's part of the, you were using that trendy word there, Jeffrey, about catching the vibe.
Yeah.
The architect, like your team, doesn't know what's in your head. And so you have to go through that process. And then one day it clicks.
Yeah.
You're like, that's the one. Like,
It
that's
is.
the one. Keep going back to the drawing board. That's the phrase, right?
It is.
And your team has done a great job of being willing to go back to the drawing board until we can get on paper what's in our head.
And what works well to build off that is if you leave yourself enough time where you can go back and forth like that, because you're not trying to start construction in 6 months or a year. You give yourself a chance to work through your ideas, to come up with just that right thing.
Yeah, that's something you and I have talked about on a couple of occasions, that as an architect, it's almost, I'm going to use this word, it's a little frustrating for you that churches wait until, it's time to build to get you in the conversation, where actually if churches are experiencing growth, a sustained growth, a significant growth pattern, then that's when they should be talking. Matter of fact, you and I was, just before our conversation right now, we were having a conversation with one of the pastors who was here previous, and they're not ready to build. They don't even have land, but they have vision, and they have growth that's taking place, and they're already having conversations. So it's not too early to jump into the conversation as far as building is concerned. Is that right?
It is. A lot of times what we'll do is just help churches, a little bit 1 month and then 2 months, nothing. Then you do a little bit. So pastors have a chance to mull it over and you don't start working on it and then, meet every 2 weeks and then at the end of 4 months, we're done. It's sometimes over a prolonged period of time because it gives you a chance to think out loud with your architect to find that right thing for you.
Yeah.
And then you think back at some point, think, man, am I glad we didn't do that first idea.
Yeah.
But you've given yourself a chance to sort things through because once you start building it, you're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I think honestly, meeting with somebody like yourself before you even start raising funds. So think of it this way. This is the way I think of it. If you're going to try to raise funds for 2 years to be able to build this building, you've got to have the plan to cast vision before that. Before you even go to your church to say, hey, let's start praying about this. You should be having that conversation with the architect, right. With these guys. And so, and then things change, like we looked at the current project we're in and kind of got an estimate on what the cost was going to be, and then COVID hit. And so everything got put on pause for a while. And when we came back to the same drawing, it was $10 million more because of the cost of building changed. And so then we had to go back to the drawing board a bunch more times. Literally. But that was before we even started raising funds. And so if your church is growing and you're thinking this might be something that's down the road, it's worth having a conversation with somebody like Jeff.
My guess would be most people listening to this podcast right now are probably not actively in a building project or have land and property, and so they're thinking this conversation is not relevant to me. Mm-hmm. But I have learned that our relationship with Jeffrey's team is kind of like a doctor. Like, before you go to the doctor, something's going on. And you'll say something I need to go see a doctor, see what's going on. And I think when you go to an architect, you've got this thing stirring inside of you. That's all you got. And if you sit down with an architect who's kingdom-minded, they've already sat with people like you. They've worked on similar properties that you're shopping for. That was our case. Mm-hmm. And the first thing you did, you goes, well, why don't you reach out to, in our case, it was James Sunick, who really had vision for what you want to do on a piece of property, very similar. And so I did. So I went and spent a day with him. And, it's like the doctor's orders, right? And so now you're able to take that thing that you've been feeling on the inside and actually seeing, okay, this is actually what we have. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the ways I think about it. Get that conversation going early. Let's get this thing.
I think a lot of times when we're working on projects, I'll size up what that is. And then I think it helps pastors talk to other pastors where they're almost like mentors, where you can just talk turkey with somebody that's in your situation, but they're further ahead than you are. So like in that case, James Sunick had a large piece of property with wetlands. As it turns out, they have a river and you have more of a creek, but a lot of property that's not developable.
Yeah.
But you can just talk about when we started with them, they weren't going to do anything until he was collecting, I think, $5,000 a month in income.
Yeah.
Well, and he wanted to do that for 3 weeks in a row. Well, the next 3 weeks, that's what he did.
Yeah.
But he has stories to tell like that.
Yeah.
And I think it gives pastors confidence when you talk to people that have done it before you that, hey, I'm not in this alone. I'm not the first ones here. If they can do it, why can't I? Yeah. And you don't follow that exact way of doing it, but you have somebody to call, talk out loud things with, and feel like, hey, if they did it, why can't I?
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
And we learned this because we got out there and started meeting people in the industry, construction, architectural design. And a lot of architects, they want the project, it's from design to build. And when we met with James on your, consultation, James said, well, we did it in phases. So here's what we did. We purchased the property, we mass graded the property, developed it, site work, all that. And there's a lot of architects, there's a lot of designer builders out there who they won't work with you like that. Yep. They want the whole thing from beginning to end. And I think that's fine. But what worked for us, everyone's story is different, was in taking the phase approach. Jeffrey and his team has worked with us to accomplish those phases. And we have, and that's kept momentum in front of our church, where our church is like, oh, we're really doing something here.
Yeah.
First they saw the trees come down. Then they saw the land kind of flattened. And now they're seeing drawings. And I think that's really important, because I would say most ministries are not going to have the budget to just go and sit with a firm and say, okay, take us from design to build.
And make that commitment.
Not all of them can do that.
Yeah.
And so there's different approaches, and I think that's key in the process.
Yeah, even in one of our conversations, Jeffrey, you mentioned that you even like to help the church find property. Because, most pastors have no building experience, okay? They got Bible experience, but they don't have building experience. Right?
Yeah.
And so they think, I'll just go buy this piece of property. Well, they don't know anything about, drilling for the soil to find out what soil's underneath the topsoil. They don't think about the topography, those kind of things. Whereas if they involve someone like you or someone that has that kind of experience, doesn't just have to be you, but somebody with that kind of experience to help them shop even their property.
You have somebody to consult with. We do front end due diligence, it's called, but helping churches test out properties. So when you buy property, it's not just the cost of the property, it's what does it take to convert that property into something that you can use.
Yep.
And things that come into play are the hilliness of the property. Like Ross has some of that.
Yep.
And so does Jarod. There's wetlands. There's the availability of public water and public sewer, and how those factor in. There's so many things that can come into play, so that when you're looking at property, something that looks pretty inexpensive to buy for a lot of it, a more expensive property might be a better
Purchase.
purchase. And then on top of all that, there's its location.
Yeah.
But all of those things matter. And if you have somebody like myself, not necessarily, but somebody that can help sort through all those things, then when you buy something, you're buying it with your eyes wide open, and you have all the information to know what all the costs are.
Can we talk about those costs real quick, since he mentioned it?
Yeah.
You got a flow going.
Go for it.
But this is just something else that we're learning in real time. Is I don't think it's a great steward of our resources as the local church to hire an architect or a builder who can build churches. I think it's important to steward those resources to someone who, this is what they do. They build churches. And we've learned through friends and relationships, horror stories of hiring a builder who can, and they may be in your church. Well, I can build a church, or we built schools. It may be something like dropping an air conditioning unit on top of your building that's made for a school that's going to be running, right, Monday through Friday, 7 to whatever, and it's putting out so much juice. It may be that type of thing that could save you millions of dollars. That's not necessary in a house of worship. And we've learned things through that. And because there's organizations out there right now, and if you go and you Google, they build churches and schools, but it's not why they exist. And I just think on the cost end,
I think having somebody that knows, what they're doing with churches, like you mentioned, an air conditioner or a furnace, they'll put it right on top of the sanctuary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So every Sunday you're in the middle of your closing prayer and it kicks on, or it vibrates things and it creates issues with your lighting or your sound. And so, you're thinking about to have somebody who does do it and has done many to go, hey, this is,
I want that there. Yeah.
Because we're building God's house. And building God's house is not just the structure, but it's the people. It's the transformation of the people in the room. And when you have something like that, you have someone that doesn't have a heart for building God's house or the experience to foresee these kind of things, then the experience in the room goes to pot. And about the time you're making your salvation call,
Yeah.
thing comes on.
Yeah.
And it ruins the
that's not the Holy
environment.
Spirit.
Yeah. So, well, the Holy Spirit has a whole lot more to overcome, right? He can still do it, but he has a lot more challenge.
I think even to build on that a little more, like I think of the church building, people call them churches. I like to think of them as Christian lifestyle centers, because you're really creating an atmosphere, not even just in the sanctuary, but everywhere, where people just love being at church for all they're getting out of it. In the auditorium, the sanctuary, the lobby has all kinds of great spots where you can mingle and have sidebar conversations with people.
Yep.
Large groups can meet in there. Kids areas that have excellence. When I grew up, my parents had to drag us to church.
Yeah.
It seems now, I think a lot of churches, the kids are dragging the parents to church because they are real geeked about getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, in this next segment, let's talk a little bit about, we have teams that are involved, okay? Because we got youth ministry, they want something out of the facility. We have the worship department, they want something out of the facility. We got kids ministry. Let's talk about how do we bring those elements and how do they impact the building cost, because we all want good ROI, return on our investment, right? If we think about per capita person that we're ministering to, we have a certain ceiling that we're going to hit if we're not careful, and to be good stewards, then we got to bring all these conversations into play in order for us to design the facility that will build God's kingdom and God's vision that particular church has. Are you understanding kind of where I'm rolling? Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, because you've been through it several times.
Yeah, well, if I remember, because it's been a little while, when we worked with you on that build, you guys came in and sat down with each different ministry lead and had them basically create a wish list, a dream list. That then we were able to sit down and say, okay, here's what every ministry's dreaming of. What's realistic? What can we actually do? And I think you even gave us, put some prices to things, generally to give us some estimates on, okay, what are these other things going to cost us? Because every youth pastor wants a half-court basketball, gym somewhere. And so,
or an LED wall.
Yeah, LED wall, things like that. And so I think for us, we've involved our ministry leads in all those conversations and tried to have realistic goals and see where we could put things together. I think having a good architect to give you real answers, not just give you what you want to hear and then you end up in a building way above what you thought, but give you real answers and feel like you're getting honest answers from them is really important.
Yeah, I think that's really key. One of the big money pits is the AVL. It's the when we started getting into this, we started looking at the average cost for an integrator. That's going to come in and bring in all of your sound, all of your media, make sure it's all interconnected, and all of those spaces you just mentioned are going to require that.
Yep.
That's been a big conversation for us. We can talk playgrounds and half-court basketball all day, but we've gotten really in the weeds on that. What do we want this room to sound like? Yeah. What do we want to put on display? Yep. And how efficient can we get with that? So there's definitely a place where you kind of get everybody in the room, kind of let them get their wish list and everything, but also if you can get ahead of, okay, we know what we want in the room, but what are the lights going to look like? Right? And what's it going to sound like? Because if you wait too long to do that and you design a room but you don't outfit it with the right AVL, you have a nightmare situation where you're going to pay millions of dollars, to get the connectivity you want. Or how many of us, everyone listening to this podcast, everyone to this table, we've been in great facilities where the lighting was terrible, where the audio was a disaster. And you can build this beautiful thing and then walk in and the atmosphere is completely turned upside down because was no one asking questions about that?
Again, here's where I think a lot of churches get in trouble, and that is they hire an architectural firm that wants that particular project on the next architectural magazine or in the magazine highlighted. And so a lot of times that in that building process, you get all the building, and then you come to the installation, because AVL is kind of the last part of the process, right? And now you got to cut. You start cutting lights, and you start cutting sound, you start cutting AV, all that stuff, and it has an impact. So speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think in my mind overall, with AVL and the building as a whole, with wish lists and all that, I always try to keep in mind what's immediately going to make a difference and what can be thought of as a master plan. So for AVL systems, I think it's great to have a lot of capability, but you don't want to build something that nobody knows how to operate because it's too complicated. But also, you can build it as a master plan. So I think you can have an AVL system, and maybe you put in half of it, and then you can pick away at it over the years, adding more to it, where you're not trying to buy it all at once. Yeah. And the same kind of thing holds true with the building. With if you think in terms of a master plan, then I think what you really want to do is make sure that your church is humming on Sunday morning. So what's it going to take to make everything really work magnificently on a Sunday morning with worship, kids ministry, nurseries, lobby space, where you have it all. Other things you can maybe add on or do separately, but you have to have those really clicking, and that's what builds the core of your church. And then you build the core of your church, you can easier afford adding a half-court basketball, or that kind of a thing, but it's not central to your Sunday ministry. Yeah. The other thing I try to do is to always keep in mind finding the right balance between being realistic and idealistic. Like if you're overly idealistic, you try to do too much and you end up with nothing. Yeah. Because you're trying to do too much and you can't afford it all. Yeah. But if you're too practical, then you end up with something that really shoots too low and doesn't provide that excellence that you're looking for.
When you sent us to Victory Life, I talked to the worship leader. The building was amazing. I talked to the worship leader. I said, "What would you have done differently?" He said the first Sunday they started, they had to build an extra section of stage. This is how they christened their building, because they didn't think of where the drums were going to be. Yeah. So they just built this thing, and they got to build an extra. They got to get 2x4s, all right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the important part about getting those people in the room to say, okay, we know what you want. What's going to be in the room? Where are you going to put that? Where are you going to put that? Because he doesn't know that, right? Yeah. And you can't read what's on their mind. But that's another reason why I really appreciate you saying, hey, go there, walk around, ask questions. So
yeah. Or you were saying about sound and lighting. If you're building a sanctuary, you need to go have some realistic conversations about what it's going to cost you for your sound and your lighting. We're in the process of getting ready to build a new sanctuary, and our sound and lighting people are talking about $1 million for sound and lighting. Oh, yeah. And people go, $1 million? That's crazy. And we're like, let's add so we have a little bit more wiggle room just in case. Yeah. Now maybe we'll come in a little under, but it's not likely. like you think that's a lot of money, but in today's day and age, that to get quality sound, and in a church, almost every room has sound in it. Every room. Every single room has sound in it. And so you've got to think about that, which that's not the case in, necessarily a school building or this or that, but it is in a church. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, it's been a good conversation today as we think about building. We've got a lot of churches that are in the process of building and churches that are growing. Any final thoughts that you want to give us as we kind of conclude this?
Yeah, I would just say if you are in that process, just to reach out to someone like Jeffrey Parker, start having the conversation, dreaming a little bit, and seeing where they steer you from there.
My point would be, we just talked about $1 million sound system, and people go, that's impossible. Listen, God's bank account is bigger than anybody's bank account on earth. And if it's God's vision and plan that you'll do it and you're following him, he will provide for you. It might take some time. It's going to take some effort, but I believe that God can bring just what you need just when you need it. And so we're a walking testimony of that at our church with the project we did with you and what we're going into right now. And so trust him. If it's his plan and vision, he will get you there.
Yeah. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's important for pastors to not be intimidated about exploring making things bigger and better. I like to say, we don't want to get in God's way. If God is blessing your ministry and you are changing lives and making a big difference in your community, and your building is getting full, to me, we're getting in God's way if we don't do something about it. And you have to follow God's lead and say, he's almost like saying, what do I have to do to get through to you that you need to make more space so I can make more of a difference in your community?
Yeah. Amen.
Love it.
Well, hey, I know you're in the process of building God's house like these guys here at the table. And we really want to challenge you. Don't wait. Get started today. Believe God and see lives transformed as you build God's house.